Imagine paying for a subscription service, right? And this service gives you the power to create up to 2,000 completely original, fully produced songs every single month.
Which is just a massive amount of output.
Oh, it's a ridiculous amount. But then a new rule drops, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you're only legally allowed to download and keep 60 of those tracks.
Yeah, it's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking a single policy update from the AI music giant Suno. And this update is effectively, well, slamming the door shut on the whole era of infinite AI music.
It really is the end of an era. We're looking at a huge philosophical earthquake in the generative AI landscape today.
Exactly. We are shifting from this wild world of boundless digital abundance, right, into this new era of curated, strictly metered scarcity. And we're going to explore why this matters to you, whether you make art or just consume it.
And what makes this deep dive so fascinating is how a really mundane change, like literally just putting a hard limit on a download button, forces us to confront how we value creativity.
Right, because it's not just a tech update.
No, not at all. We'll look at the technical mechanics, sure, but we really have to get into the environmental realities, the generational anxieties, and the deeply personal implications for anyone engaging with this tech right now.
Yeah, and to start, there's this incredible image circulating in the tech community right now. It just perfectly captures the mood.
The watercolor one.
Yes, it's done in this really evocative watercolor style. And it shows this single, solitary door just standing wide open in the middle of this stark, gray, almost brutalist landscape.
It's a very striking visual.
It is. But through that door, you see a brilliant, boundless sunset. And musical notes are physically floating out of the doorway, scattering out into the gray sky.
And then the text at the bottom.
Right, written right across the bottom in plain text, it just says the end of an era.
I love that image because, it doesn't read like some sterile corporate press release. It really feels like a eulogy.
A eulogy for a very wild period of internet history.
Exactly. For the last couple of years, generative tools were functionally an infinite sandbox. You typed a thought, and bam, a fully realized piece of media just materialized.
The door was wide open.
The door was wide open. And now the platform architects are essentially building a frame around that door. They're closing it. So, to really understand the scale of this, we need to start with the hard math of Suno's new policy, which hits on September 3, 2026.
Okay, let's unpack this math because the new limits are surprisingly harsh. If you are a free tier user, you now get exactly 7 downloads.
And we should clarify that timeline.
Yes, I need to emphasize this for everyone listening. That is not 7 downloads a month. That is 7 downloads in total for the entire lifetime of your account.
Which is basically nothing if you're experimenting.
Right. Now, if you upgrade to a pro subscription, you get 20 song downloads a month. And if you're on the highest tier, the Premier plan, you get 60 per month.
But we also need to look at the mechanics of what a download actually means in this new ecosystem. The nuance here is huge.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the limit is counted per unique song. Let's say you produce a track, right? You download it as a standard MP3 to just listen in your car.
Right, just checking the mix.
Exactly. And then later you decide, hey, I need the uncompressed WAV file for a video project I'm doing.
Right.
Downloading that WAV doesn't consume a second slot. It's tied to the unique generation.
I would actually take that a step further, especially for any audio producers we have listening, because this policy also applies to stems.
That's a really good point.
And just to clarify for anyone who doesn't mix music, stems are the isolated layers of a song. So instead of the whole mixed track, you download just the isolated drum beat or just the bass line or the vocals.
You can drop them into a DW.
Right, like Pro Tools or Ableton, and manipulate them yourself. Grabbing those stems does not burn extra download slots as long as it's from the same bass song.
Which is a crucial affordance for serious creators, I think. And you also aren't penalized if you, say, lose a file and have to re-download something you've already exported.
Oh, that's a relief at least.
Right. But here is the massive catch. Unused monthly download slots do not roll over.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you don't use your 60 downloads in October, you don't start November with 120. It is a very strict use it or lose it allowance.
Wow. And here's the element that is just causing absolute shockwaves among legacy users. This policy applies retroactively to existing libraries.
That's the part that really stings for people.
I mean, think about it. If you have been experimenting with this tech for 2 years, and you have, say, 2,000 songs sitting on their servers, your past is now subject to the new future.
Yep. Starting September 3rd, pulling an older song out of the platform and onto your hard drive drains one of your new monthly slots.
That's wild. Your library stays playable, right?
Yeah.
Like as a link inside their walled garden. But taking the file actually out is now heavily metered.
And honestly, I see an even more dramatic shift hiding in the updated terms of service. This is not just a technical bandwidth issue.
What do you mean?
It is a fundamental rewriting of digital ownership. The new terms explicitly connect a user's commercial rights to an authorized download.
Wait, seriously?
Yes, meaning even if you are a paid user who technically owns the commercial rights to the music you generate, you can only actually monetize it or commercially release it if you obtained it through one of your strictly permitted download slots.
Oh, I see. That is clearly designed to kill the workarounds.
Absolutely, because if you only have 60 downloads, people are naturally going to try stream ripping.
Right, right. For those unfamiliar, stream ripping is when you use third-party software like OBS or a virtual audio cable to just internally record the audio as it plays through your computer's sound card.
Which bypasses the download button entirely.
Exactly. And Suno is explicitly outlawing that. They're turning the authorized download button into a metered entitlement for ownership outside the platform.
It creates this completely fascinating paradox, honestly, between generation and extraction.
It's a glaring contradiction. Let's just look at the math here. The Premier plan gives you enough generation credits to create up to 2,000 songs a month.
Right.
But you can only export 60. That is literally like a dealership selling you a high-performance vehicle with a massive 500-gallon gas tank. But they put a physical governor on the engine so you can only drive it 60 miles off the lot.
That's a great analogy.
What are you actually paying for then?
Well, that discrepancy completely redefines the product. Historically, in the generative AI space, buying more credits meant buying more finished assets.
Right. 10 credits equaled 10 pictures or whatever.
Exactly. If you bought 1,000 credits, you expected 1,000 usable pieces of media. But under this new paradigm, those 2,000 generation credits feel almost ornamental.
Yeah, they're just play money.
You are no longer buying the finished product. You are buying access to exploration. I actually think of it like a digital camera.
Okay, tell me more.
You are allowed to take absolutely unlimited photographs. You can shoot all day, try every angle, test every lighting setup. But the camera manufacturer dictates that you can only export 60 photos from the SD card to your laptop every month.
Oh, wow. That completely flips the psychology of the creator.
It really does.
Because the original appeal of tools like this was the utter lack of friction. The workflow was incredibly simple. You get an idea, you type a prompt, a song is born, and you keep it forever.
Right. You could experiment
Recklessly. You could generate 20 variations of, I don't know, a bizarre jazz metal fusion just to hear what a banjo sounds like over heavy guitar distortion.
Yeah.
And you kept all 20 variations.
Because the marginal cost of asking why not was literally zero.
Zero friction, zero cost.
Mm-hmm.
But the new workflow introduces a massive psychological speed bump. Now the process is idea, prompt, song, and then you have to stop.
You have to pause.
You have to actively evaluate the art. You have to ask yourself, is this specific track actually worth burning one of my precious 60 export slots?
Which brings us to a phenomenon we can call the curation paradox.
The curation paradox. I like that.
Basically, by forcing artificial scarcity at the export level, the platform is inadvertently forcing taste.
Right, because you can't just keep the garbage anymore.
Exactly. In the era of generative AI, producing the media is no longer the bottleneck. Production is completely effortless. Selection is the new heavy lifting.
I love that concept. It really reminds me of the history of photography. Think about the early days of smartphones and digital point-and shoots.
When we stopped using film.
Right. Digital storage became incredibly cheap compared to physical film. We went from 24 shots on a roll to literally thousands of shots on a memory card. And what was the result?
We took terrible photos.
We took thousands of blurry, badly framed, meaningless photos, and we just dumped them all onto our hard drives. Our digital lives became junk drawers. We didn't have to choose, so we kept everything.
We outsourced our memory to the machine, but we lost the curation of the memory in the process.
Exactly. I mean, that tracks perfectly with what is happening here. Suno's new limit is effectively forcing digital creators back into a 35mm film mindset.
That's a brilliant way to look at it.
When you know you only have a finite number of exposures left on a roll of film, your entire physical relationship to the camera changes. You don't just mash the shutter button.
You actually look through the viewfinder.
You check the lighting. You frame the subject. You wait for the exact moment the subject smiles. You only commit when you know it's worth it.
And that's the curation paradox in action. It suggests that limiting supply actually increases the quality of human attention.
Because attention is finite.
Right. The weakest characteristic of generative media so far has been this idea of production without selection. We've engineered a world of infinite supply, but human attention remains strictly finite.
So the limit creates friction.
By limiting the exports, the creator is forced into a critical dialogue with their own work. They actually have to ask, does this composition work? Is the vocal performance compelling?
Am I exporting this because I have a genuine emotional connection to it, or just because clicking generate gives me a cheap dopamine hit?
Exactly. It forces intentionality.
But, if we step back, we have to acknowledge that corporate platforms aren't imposing these limits just to become philosophical art critics.
Right. They aren't trying to teach us a lesson about 35mm film.
No. They are doing this to solve a massive infrastructure and industry problem.
You're touching on the operational reality here. The stated goal behind these limits is to combat fraud, server strain, and a really specific behavior known as spray and pray spam.
Okay, let's get into the spam issue.
There's this fascinating research from 2026 analyzing the footprint of AI music on major streaming platforms. And the data reveals that an astonishing 93% of identified AI-generated music receives little to no plays.
93%. We really need to explain why that number exists, because it ties directly into how streaming platforms actually function.
Right, the plumbing of the industry.
Exactly. A lot of people just assume you upload a song to Spotify, and if it's good, people find it. But that is not how it works at all. Spotify operates on algorithmic recommendations and heavily curated editorial playlists.
And crucially, it operates on a pro rata royalty system.
Which means what, exactly?
It means all the subscription money from users goes into one giant pie. And the pie is divided up based on the percentage of total streams a track gets across the whole platform.
Which creates a bizarre incentive structure for bad actors.
A completely broken incentive structure.
Because if the marginal cost of creating a song is zero, a spammer isn't trying to make a hit record. They just generate 5,000 mediocre generic tracks.
Like ambient focus beats or lo-fi study music.
Generic gym playlists. They flood the streaming services with these tracks under fake names. And even if each song only accidentally catches a few algorithmic plays or gets passively listened to in the background of a coffee shop,
5,000 songs generating fractions of a penny eventually adds up to real money.
it's an arbitrage game.
It is an attempt to siphon capital out of the royalty pool through sheer volume. And this is why the broader music industry is reacting so aggressively right now.
They have to protect the pie.
Exactly. Spotify is actively deploying audio detection to label synthetic artist personas, effectively shadow banning them from those crucial editorial playlists. Major labels like Warner Music Group are pushing heavily for licensed, tightly controlled AI models.
The entire industry is moving to restrict mass automated distribution.
Yes.
Okay, I understand the desire to block the spammers, I really do. But here is where the logic of Suno's policy falls apart for me.
Oh, how so?
It's like a city realizing that shoplifters are using oversized backpacks to steal from stores, so the city just bans all oversized backpacks everywhere.
I see what you mean.
Sure, you stop the shoplifters, but you also just criminalized all the kids walking to school with their textbooks.
That's a fair point.
If the goal is to protect Spotify's royalty pool, why throttle personal, local MP3 downloads? Keeping an MP3 of my weird, experimental, medieval jazz fusion on my laptop's hard drive does absolutely zero damage to the music industry.
It doesn't affect the pro rata pie at all.
Zero impact. So why not offer unlimited local downloads, but heavily restrict the API integrations or the commercial release registrations?
That is the central tragedy of this transition, honestly. You've identified the exact flaw in the net they've cast.
Because the net catches everyone.
Right. Because to a server infrastructure, a spammer making 5,000 songs to manipulate streaming royalties looks mathematically identical to a hobbyist making 5,000 songs for deep personal expression.
The servers just see bandwidth.
Exactly. There is a perfect example of this in the wider tech discussion right now. Let's look at a YouTube creator known as Max of All Trades.
Oh, I've heard of this project.
Yeah, so this creator generated over 2,500 songs. But he wasn't doing it to spam Spotify. He was building a massive, intricate, fictional universe called Azima.
It's a world-building project on an unprecedented scale.
Totally unprecedented.
Imagine the dedication here. He wasn't making generic lo-fi beats. He was using the AI to map out the cultural histories of 40 fictional countries.
40 countries.
He was generating national anthems, historical folk songs, and traditional instruments specific to imaginary regions. For a world builder, the sheer volume of the generation actually is the artwork.
The breadth of the archive is the point.
Exactly. He needs those 2,000 songs to make the fictional world feel lived in and real.
Culturally and ethically, the spammer and the world builder are engaging in completely opposite behaviors.
Right. One is a scam, the other is art.
One is executing a cynical, automated extraction of capital. The other is utilizing the tech for a deeply personal, wildly imaginative form of creative expression.
But corporate policy can't tell the difference.
Corporate policy cannot measure intent. It can only measure bandwidth. So the policy catches both the fraudster and the world builder in the exact same net.
It takes a tool that functioned as a boundless creative sandbox and drops a toll booth right in the middle of it.
Effectively shutting down projects like Azima.
Which is heartbreaking. But, talking about servers and bandwidth forces us to look at the physical cost of these digital sandboxes.
Right, the environmental angle.
We've been talking about these download limits as an artificial corporate barrier, but those server limits are actually masking a very real physical limit in the real world. Every time a user bypasses friction and mass generates 3,000 songs, real-world resources are burning.
We absolutely have to address the massive wave of environmental guilt currently associated with generative AI.
It's a huge part of the conversation right now.
It's a critical conversation, and it's one that is often dominated by panic rather than data. We constantly see these headlines about AI data centers draining local rivers and reviving coal plants.
Which sounds terrifying.
It does.
Yeah.
But to have a rational discussion, we need to calculate the actual footprint of an individual user. Let's use our world builder, Max of all trades, as a case study.
Okay, let's run the numbers.
What is the environmental cost of generating an archive of 2,747 songs?
Well, let's break down the mechanics first, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people wonder, why does typing a prompt to make a song use water at all?
That's a great question. It comes down to thermodynamics.
Okay, science time.
AI models require massive clusters of graphics processing units, or GPUs, housed in these hyperscale data centers.
Right, huge server farms.
And when these chips perform the complex mathematical operations required to generate audio, they draw an immense amount of electricity. And as a byproduct, they generate a staggering amount of heat.
And if you don't remove that heat, the servers literally melt.
Exactly. And the most efficient way to cool these sprawling facilities is through evaporative cooling towers.
So they use water.
Essentially, they run water over the hot systems, the water absorbs the heat, evaporates, and is vented out of the building. So every single prompt translates to a tiny fraction of electricity burned and a tiny fraction of water evaporated.
Okay, so looking at the calculations circulating among data scientists who are analyzing this specific workflow, the footprint for a single song generation comes out to roughly 2.4 liters of water.
Right.
And the carbon emissions equivalent of driving a standard car for 0.1 miles.
So let's aggregate that. If a dedicated hobbyist spends 2 years generating 2,747 tracks for a massive fictional universe, what is their total individual toll on the planet?
The math comes out to roughly 6,593 liters of water, which is about 1,742 U.S. gallons, and the emissions equivalent of roughly 275 miles of driving.
Now, at first glance, 1,742 gallons of water sounds like a massive amount for a hobby.
It sounds like a swimming pool.
Human brains are notoriously terrible at intuitively grasping volumetric scale. We hear 1,000 gallons and we imagine a flood.
Right, it triggers an emotional response.
But let's contextualize those numbers using data from the Environmental Protection Agency. According to the EPA, the average American household wastes nearly 10,000 gallons of water every single year simply through minor plumbing leaks.
Wait, a running toilet, a dripping faucet.
Exactly, just passive leaks.
I need to pause and just do the mental math on that.
Yeah.
You're telling me that this massive 2-year hyper-obsessive AI music project
Yes.
used the water equivalent of 17% of what an average home loses to a leaky pipe in a single year.
Precisely. I mean, yes, that is the scale we are dealing with.
That is wild.
To put it another way, if you took one extra 8-minute shower every 6 or 7 days, you would outpace the water footprint of this entire 2-year AI project.
And emissions data is equally eye-opening. 275 miles of driving spread out over 2 full years of a hobby.
It's basically nothing in the grand scheme.
It is the equivalent of a single, modest weekend road trip to a neighboring city, amortized over 24 months.
It completely upends the narrative that individual AI users are single-handedly destroying the planet.
I mean, think about how this compares to literally any other physical human hobby.
Oh, the comparisons are fascinating.
Yeah. Let's say you are into tabletop gaming, right? Like Warhammer. Or you are an avid hiker. If you drive 30 miles every weekend to get to a hiking trail or to a comic book store for a gaming tournament, you will burn through that entire 275-mile footprint in less than 3 months.
And that calculation doesn't even factor in the supply chain footprint of those physical hobbies?
Right. The carbon cost of manufacturing synthetic Gore-Tex jackets and rubber hiking boots.
The petroleum used to mold plastic gaming miniatures.
The logistics of shipping printed board games across the ocean on cargo ships. The massive HVAC systems required to cool the convention centers where the tournaments are held.
It adds up fast.
We have to compare AI hobbies to other human hobbies, not to a baseline of absolute zero.
Now, any responsible data scientist will add a caveat here.
Of course.
Calculating AI water footprints is notoriously complex. The actual impact depends heavily on where the data center is located.
Right, the local grid.
Is it running on a grid powered by hydroelectricity or a grid powered by coal? Are they using closed-loop cooling systems or drawing from a drought-stricken municipal water supply?
Those variables matter.
They do. But even with those variables, the core finding remains robust. A multi-year AI hobby has a measurable non-zero environmental cost. It is not free.
But it is definitively not an environmental atrocity.
Exactly. We must separate the valid systemic critiques of industrial data center expansion from the moral culpability of a single individual sitting in their living room pursuing a creative outlet.
De-shaming the individual hobbyist is so crucial. Existing as a human being who pursues joy inevitably leaves some kind of footprint.
It's unavoidable.
But if the individual environmental impact isn't actually catastrophic, that raises a fascinating question.
Why is everyone so mad?
Yes, why is society so universally panicked and actively hostile toward generative AI?
Yeah.
If it's not just the environment, where's the anger coming from?
It's a great question. And looking at the demographic data, the generational anxiety map is completely backwards from what you might expect with a new technology.
How so?
Well, it defies the historical adoption curve. Usually, younger generations embrace new tech while older generations reject it.
Right, like social media or smartphones.
But if we look at the breakdown here, baby boomers generally show lower adoption rates. They prefer the human touch in their media, but they are largely insulated from the economic disruption. They are watching from a distance.
They're mostly retired, so their jobs aren't at risk.
Exactly. Then you have Gen X. They find themselves in the role of pragmatic gatekeepers. They are the middle and upper management class deciding where and how AI is permitted in corporate workflows.
They're making the rules.
Right. Millennials are the transition generation. They are heavy adopters, normalizing the tools in their daily lives. But because they have lived through multiple economic recessions and platform shifts,
They are demanding strict boundaries and ethical guardrails.
spot on. But the generation that completely breaks the mold is Gen Z.
Okay, this is the really interesting part.
They represent the highest percentage of daily generative AI users. They are using it to write essays, brainstorm, generate images.
They're practically living on it.
Yet simultaneously, surveys show they harbor the absolute highest levels of anxiety, anger, and deep-seated resentment toward the technology.
They are the AI native skeptics.
It seems contradictory until you overlay that data with their current economic reality.
Exactly. Think about where Gen Z is in their life cycle right now. They are in college, or they are trying to land their first white-collar jobs.
The entry-level market.
Right. And for the last 10 years, society told them, learn to code, learn graphic design, become a copywriter. These are safe, creative, middle-class careers.
And then the rug gets pulled out.
They are entering the workforce at the exact historical moment that generative AI is threatening to completely saw off the entry-level rungs of those career ladders.
The junior developer role, the junior copywriter, the entry-level illustrator. These are the exact tasks that language and image models excel at automating.
So they're trapped.
Gen Z can perfectly recognize that a tool is incredibly useful for accelerating their own workflow, while simultaneously despising what that tool is doing to the economic landscape they are desperately trying to inherit.
It is a highly rational, economically driven anxiety. They feel the social contract was broken.
Which makes me deeply curious about the cohorts coming up behind them.
Like Gen Alpha.
Yes, you have Gen Alpha, who are currently teenagers and younger kids. The data suggests they aren't forming these rigid pro-AI or anti-AI tribal identities.
That's refreshing.
Instead, they are growing up asking a much more nuanced question: when is AI appropriate?
Which implies they inherently view it as a tool with a specific time and place rather than an existential invader.
And then we reach Gen Beta, the generation being born right now.
Oh boy.
For them, the conceptual shift will be absolute. Interacting with conversational machines and generating ambient media won't be an event, it won't be a disruption, it'll just be the invisible infrastructure of reality.
To understand how they will view generative AI, just ask a 10-year-old today how they emotionally process the arrival of Wi-Fi.
They didn't.
Exactly. They didn't process it, it was just always there, in the air.
It's just a given.
I think this is a vital moment for you, the listener, to do some self-reflection. Depending on the year you were born, you are bringing completely different economic baggage, trauma, and cultural expectations to that Suno download button.
And that generational transition leads us to what social theorists are calling the permanent scar of the AI era.
The permanent scar, what does that mean?
Eventually, the economic shocks will stabilize, and the copyright lawsuits will settle into new legal frameworks. But one thing is fundamentally gone forever, and that is our baseline digital trust.
The loss of innocence.
Yes.
We can never go back to the default assumption that seeing a photograph of an event or hearing a voice recording of a person means a human being authentically performed that action in physical reality.
To be fair, generative AI didn't invent visual deception.
True. Photoshop has been around forever.
Right. Photoshop, airbrushing, audio splicing have existed for decades, but AI completely collapsed the cost and the skill barrier of convincing fabrication.
Anyone can do it now in 5 seconds.
That permanent scar of distrust will force society to build entirely new, massive infrastructures around provenance, digital verification, and watermarking just to establish basic consensus reality.
It's going to be exhausting. But consider the flip side of that scar. There is an incredibly hopeful consequence hiding in that loss of trust.
Oh, tell me.
It fundamentally shifts how we value human art. A lot of the panic assumes that AI will destroy human creativity because it can mimic the output.
Right, the doom and gloom narrative.
But AI isn't going to replace the human element. It's going to elevate human-made into a premium, verifiable, highly sought-after label.
We have seen this exact pattern play out in the history of art and technology before. Let's look at the invention of the camera.
Okay.
In the mid-19th century, painters were absolutely terrified. The primary economic function of a painter back then was to provide a realistic, documentary record of reality.
A portrait of a monarch or landscape of an estate.
Suddenly, a machine could do that instantly and with perfect accuracy.
But the camera didn't kill painting. It liberated it.
Exactly.
Because painters no longer had to act as human photocopiers, they were free to explore emotion, light, and subjective experience. It gave rise to Impressionism, to Cubism, to abstract art.
Similarly, look at the Industrial Revolution. When mass manufacturing allowed factories to produce thousands of identical perfect chairs for a fraction of the cost, the craft of woodworking didn't vanish.
Right.
Instead, handmade ceased to be the default and became a premium trait. People became willing to pay vastly more for a chair with slight imperfections because those imperfections proved a human hand shaped the wood.
Because the nature of scarcity shifts. Right now, we are drowning in content. There are millions of technically competent AI songs being generated every day.
The sensory output is completely abundant.
Therefore, the scarcity is no longer the content itself. The scarce commodity is now the human attention, the intentionality, the physical labor, and the story behind the art.
The story is everything.
When a band releases an album and says, 3 of my friends and I locked ourselves in a sweaty garage for 6 months, fought over these lyrics, and recorded this on analog tape, that context becomes deeply culturally meaningful.
We don't just consume the audio frequencies.
We consume the biography and the human effort.
That is the premium of human connection. But getting to that point of cultural equilibrium is painful. And this brings us to the tragic irony of our current discourse.
The algorithms.
As society desperately tries to figure out these new boundaries of trust and value, the people using AI responsibly are becoming invisible collateral damage.
Because of how social media algorithms fundamentally operate. Algorithms prioritize outrage, conflict, and threat detection.
They feed on anger.
So the quiet majority of people who are using AI as a healthy personal hobby like our world builder mapping out the fictional nations of Azima,
Hmm.
they generate zero algorithmic friction.
Nobody clicks on that.
They get no clicks. Nobody cares about a headline that reads, "Local person enjoys creative hobby in their living room and hurts no one."
But a headline about a malicious fraudster using voice cloning AI to impersonate a beloved deceased artist and steal their streaming royalties.
That triggers a deep existential threat response. It gets hate-shared millions of times across every platform.
The result is that our societal criticism accidentally becomes a massive distribution network for the worst actors.
That's such a dark irony. The absolute worst, most pathological, most cynical examples of AI generation become the general public's only conception of what the technology is actually used for.
If your only exposure to AI is seeing the scams that go viral on Twitter, of course you think the tool is inherently evil.
And this creates an incredibly hostile, toxic external environment for anyone who simply enjoys the tool as a creative outlet.
Which brings us to the most intimate, deeply personal takeaway from analyzing this ecosystem. We have to bring all these massive concepts, the corporate server limits, the data center, cooling towers, the generational economics, down to the level of the individual human psyche.
It all comes back to the person sitting at the computer.
Right. There is a profound reflection circulating from high-volume creators who are looking back at the last 2 years. Many of them describe the era of infinite generation as being internally fulfilling, but externally unfulfilling.
Internally fulfilling, externally unfulfilling. It is the defining loneliness of this new medium.
Think about what the machine actually provides. Generative AI is extraordinarily good at granting you absolute creative agency.
It really is.
It allows you to take a wildly complex idea that has lived locked inside your imagination for years and instantly give it voice, instrumentation, and tangible reality.
You can finally hear the song that was stuck in your head,
That is a deeply internally fulfilling experience.
but it cannot give you shared meaning.
No, it can't.
The machine can render the audio file, but it cannot look you in the eye and say, "I listened to the lyrics you wrote and they moved me. I understand what you were trying to say."
Art is fundamentally an act of communication, not just manifestation. Abundance solves the mechanical problem of expression, but it utterly fails to solve the human problem of connection.
And the tragedy is, when a creator tries to bridge that gap, when they take this deeply personal, internally fulfilling song and share it with the external world, the algorithmic internet often greets them with immediate hostility.
Because the culture has been trained to see the AI method before they are willing to engage with the meaning.
They see the tool, they assume the worst intent, and the creator is left isolated.
So, what is the path forward for the individual? How do you find peace at the end of this chaotic era of abundance?
What's the advice here?
The healthiest perspective to adopt right now is this. Do not let the external hostility of the internet rewrite the valid internal joy you experienced.
That's a great mindset.
You do not need unanimous cultural permission to decide that the things you created meant something to you.
That is so vital. You can hold two seemingly contradictory truths in your head at the same time.
Exactly.
You can fully acknowledge that generative technology created massive, real-world societal problems. The spam, the labor displacement, the permanent loss of digital trust.
All that is real.
While simultaneously acknowledging that it gave you, personally, an extraordinary window of boundless creative freedom. You don't need to apologize for the joy the sandbox brought you.
And you don't need to defensively justify the bad actors just to validate your own hobby.
Right. It requires a profound level of cognitive maturity to accept the closing of the sandbox without bitterness.
It really does.
It makes me think back to that watercolor image we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive.
It's a door.
That solitary door, standing open in the gray landscape, transitioning from a boundless musical sunset back into a framed reality. Stepping through that door into this new era of download limits, metered credits, curation, and scarcity.
It's not an apology.
And it's not a victory lap. It is stepping through with profound gratitude for having experienced a wild, temporary window of absolute magic, while accepting that this new boundary, this friction, might actually make the entire ecosystem healthier.
It gives you permission to finally stop endlessly producing and start exploring the archive you've already built.
It is the necessary evolution of the artist. Moving from the frantic question of what else can I make to the deeply intentional question of what do I actually want to keep.
Beautifully said. We have covered massive ground today.
We really have. We started with the hard facts of Suno's new September 2026 limits, the shift from buying finished digital assets to renting access to exploration.
We explored the curation paradox, where forcing artificial scarcity actually forces taste, moving us back to a 35 mm film mindset.
We looked at the mechanics of Spotify royalty pools and how policies meant to catch cynical spammers accidentally trap passionate world builders like the creator of Azima.
We broke down the thermodynamics of data centers to de-shame the environmental footprint of the hobbyist.
We mapped out the economic realities driving Gen Z's anxiety and analyzed how the human-made label will become a premium commodity in a world where digital trust is a permanent scar.
And finally, we validated the deeply human need for connection in a medium that is inherently isolating.
It really is the definitive end of the abundance era and the beginning of the curation era.
But I think there's one more piece to this puzzle.
Yes, I want to leave you with one final lingering question to ponder as we wrap up. A thought that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
The future.
If artificial scarcity, the 60-song download limits imposed by centralized corporate servers like Suno, is what currently forces us to curate and improve our AI art. What happens in 5 years?
Because the technology isn't stopping.
Exactly. What happens when we can run these massive, high-quality, studio-grade audio models entirely offline locally on our own laptops?
That's coming sooner than people think.
When the corporate toll booths disappear, when the API limits vanish, and the artificial friction is gone once again, will we have learned how to curate ourselves? Or will we drown in the infinite buffet all over again?
That will be the ultimate test of human taste.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Keep creating, keep curating, and we will see you on the other side of that open door.